Time travel. There's been many movies, many TV series. The most popular would have been Back to the Future, and more recently, the exploits of all our favorite Avengers going back in time and collecting the Infinity Stones to then correct what Thanos did. So during the airing of Loki's or Disney Plus brand new show Loki, the topic of time travel came up just due to the TVA or Time Variance Authority's own words about keeping the sacred timeline pure. So my video and other channels' videos, when they were trying to explain, you started seeing where people landed. Oh, the Avengers proved it. They discussed the theory of how time travel works, and the TVA just said because the Avengers were meant to go back in time to correct what Thanos did. The explanations and I want to call them excuses are endless. So if you want to know where I stand, just go back, to the video where I said why is what Loki did not as bad as what Captain America did, and you'll understand my position. So I want to use this time or this video to kind of tackle the dilemma of time travel, and specifically the time travel that we see in the Avengers. So I'm not denying. Many people said, "Oh, it was explained," which you're right. The Avengers Endgame explained it. The Hulk explained it, and I don't have a problem with that premise, right? If and when we create a time machine, if I took that time machine and went back to periods in my life throughout what I've already lived, I can expect to see that version of me in those timelines. And as long as I don't interact or change too much things, or that's a little bit going with the Back to the Future premise, which Tony Stark says, hey, when he tells Ant-Man to stop, he goes, wait, is your thing based on Back to the Future? And he goes, no, that would be silly, right? But in a sense, it's a little bit true, right? Because you would freak yourself out. And in those moments, like we see in the Avengers, when they go back and Captain America fights Captain America, that Captain America would then branch out to a different reality. But as we know, Steve Rogers at the end of Endgame was forced to go back to the point where they took the stones. Now, is there a debate to what and if he could have? Yes, there is that. But we're going to take it as its face value. He accomplished his mission, and then he took some pin particles and bounced to 1940 whatever and spent out his life with Peggy Carter, and then ended up giving Sam the shield, right? So again, I'm not negating or trying to make the excuse that that's not possible. It's not only possible, it's feasible, and theoretically, it's something that is accomplishable, right? Even though, given certain scientists and way more smarter minds than myself, that can't be done. But again, whether it can or not, you can find equally smart people on both sides of the aisle. So them traveling backwards, or even not just them as far as them being the Avengers, but Steve Rogers being able to go back. Again, I don't have a problem with that, because you are still the person is still there, right? The other version of you is still there. So that's why you have a lot of people that theorize that there was two Steve Rogers. The problem happens, and this is where I was saying, look, under what the TVA is saying. So the point that I was arguing in my video of, why is what Loki did worse than what Captain America did? Because Loki just grabbed the Tesseract and move from his reality, right? And I get that, right? He messed up the timeline. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. He's supposed to go up to Asgard with with Thor, and how we see it play out in the movie. But he then changed that and took himself out of the equation. So all future events from that point cannot happen anymore. I don't care what Owen Wilson's character Morbius shows them, those never happen. Obviously, we know in the show that the Loki that we're seeing is not the same Loki, it's a variant. But that variant in the multiple universes scenario took the Tesseract and bounced with it. A problem that the Avengers created, not Loki. Loki just took advantage of a situation. So in my video, I also say that Thanos, or not even in my video, in some of the threads that I was arguing, which led to the creation of this video, was that Thanos did the exact same thing in Avengers Endgame, but he did it far worse, or not even, let's not even call it far worse. Let's call it in an equal playing field, or in an equal as to Loki. He removed himself from the timeline. So when Nebula helps Thanos, use the pin particles and move from 2013 all the way to 2023, he, by all intensive purposes, removed himself from the events that followed from right before Guardians of the Galaxy start off. There is no other version of him moving forward. I don't care what happened in Infinity War. All those events are gone. They're dusted, if you will. They're Thanos snapped out of existence, because there is no other person, right? So it's like if I went and took a time machine and just dropped it off in prehistoric, where the first ape, I think her name is like Betty or Desi or whatever the hell her name is, the first like Homo sapien. If I would remove her and she took the time machine and traveled to the future, and she didn't evolve, would humans would cease to exist? I was gonna ask a question: would human exist? No, human existence, as we call Homo sapiens, would not have evolved like we did, because there would be a break in the chain, and that's exactly what Thanos did. So by Thanos moving forward, the events of Guardian of the Galaxy never happens. The Guardians of the Galaxy crew never come together. Ronan is still alive. Ego, the living planet, is still alive. Star-Lord is still half god, half human. Xander was never destroyed when he went there and grabbed, I think it was the Power Stone that was in Xander's at that time. The events of Infinity War, that doesn't happen. That means Gamora's still alive, Black Widow's still alive, Vision, doesn't get the gem stuff, taken out of his head, and it just keeps on trickling. And even Thor never needs to go get Stormbreaker, because there's never a need, because Thanos never existed in that timeline, because he moved to the future, and then he dies in the future, and that's the paradox. So not that he traveled to the future, is that he ultimately goes from one point in the past, travels to the future, and dies there. That means everything up from 2013 to 2018 do not happen, and even his time in the garden do not happen, because he ultimately goes right up to the point where the Avengers are doing their time hikes, which creates these paradoxes. And ultimately, what I think, we have a broken timeline. Even though the show Loki is trying to show us about this sacred timeline, I think that's all BS. I think the timeline has been broken ever since these two factions, the Avengers on one end and Thanos on the other, when he used the pin particles to move forward in time, which ultimately erased everything he did. So like I said, the Guardians aren't, they're not created. And so I'm not going to go over the list, but you see what I'm saying. Every one of those events that was directly correlating with something that Thanos did is ultimately gone. And that's the problem, where I was like, how is that not worse than what Loki did? And people were all up in arms, calling me an idiot. Oh, I'm not a Marvel fan, and I don't know what I'm talking about. As opposed to taking a step back and looking at it for what we were actually shown. So I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on this theory or idea that I have and put forward. Do you think that what I put out is a valid argument, as far as like, hey, look, this is what this person did, and this is what this other person, it's equal. They removed themselves from a timeline. So why was one almost, being taken away? And I get it, the TVA is probably going to be the evil person, but let's just take it for what we know and how Thanos. And I get some people, oh, maybe the TVA wanted him out, maybe the TVA, needed Thanos to disappear and do that. Well, it's an easy fix, but the problem is that we create a paradox. What happens to the events? Because the explanation that Hulk gave us in Endgame does not match Thanos moving up in past. His future doesn't become his past. Like he said, oh, if you go back, your past becomes your future, and your future becomes your past. That's not what Thanos did. Thanos literally, like I said, he took himself out of the timeline and moved forward. There's no memories of him doing any of this stuff, of arguing with Ronan like we see in, Guardians of the Galaxy #1. There is none of that, oh, fine, I'll do it myself after the events of what, Civil War, I think, or maybe Age of Ultron. I can't remember which one of those where it's on the end credits. So anyways, I wanted to put that out there just to get the feel for some of you fans out there. What do you guys think? Do you think this is a valid theory? Do you think it's a valid idea? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and until next time.